I never expected a glance to feel like it could stop my heart. But the moment she smiled at me, the world narrowed down to her, her presence, her scent, the subtle tilt of her head that suggested she knew more than she let on. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight spilling across her hair like liquid gold, and even from across the room, I could tell she carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that made people notice. She was beautiful, impossibly so for a woman in her mid-40s, but it wasn't just the elegance. It was the way she lingered at the edge of vulnerability, the kind that didn't beg for attention but demanded it anyway. I cleared my throat, pretending to check my phone, though I couldn't stop watching her. Her hand brushed against the coffee cup on the counter, slow and deliberate, and for a fraction of a second, our fingers almost touched. I felt the tiny spark as if it were electricity. She noticed, too. Her eyes flicked to mine, and in that brief meeting, a current ran between us that neither of us could, or would, ignore. "Don't look so startled," she said, voice soft, velvety, and somehow teasing. I felt heat creep into my face. I wasn't, I stumbled, words failing me. She let out a small, knowing smile, the kind that suggested she understood more than she should. She stepped closer, just enough that the warmth of her body reached me before she even spoke again. "You can be honest with me. You've been pretending for a long time, haven't you?" I wanted to tell her that I wasn't pretending, that every glance, every hesitant word, had been real. But the confession stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, too aware of how near she was. The air between us thickened, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Her perfume, something faintly floral, with a hint of something darker, wrapped around me, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly, reading me, and my chest tightened. The quiet room felt suddenly smaller, charged, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to watch us. I noticed how she fiddled with the edge of her sleeve, a small, intimate gesture, and how her lips pressed together just slightly as if she were holding back words meant only for me. My hand itched to reach out, to touch, to bridge the invisible distance that separated us. But I didn't move. Then she leaned closer, so close that her hair brushed my shoulder, and whispered something that made my pulse skip. "There's something I've wanted to tell you, something you shouldn't forget." I wanted to ask, to hear, to break the moment into words. But before I could, the office door swung open abruptly, and the sound echoed sharply through the quiet space. Her eyes met mine, wide, a flash of something fleeting, warning? Anticipation, and she stepped back just enough to mask the closeness we'd shared. The moment shattered, yet it lingered, thick and sticky in the air. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at her as she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and gave me that smile again, one part mischief, one part promise, and the world spun around me, leaving only the echo of her words hanging, something I wouldn't, ever forget. And then, silence. The office was quiet again, the hum of the air conditioning filling the spaces between us like a soft, deliberate rhythm. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about that fleeting closeness, the brush of her hair against my shoulder, and the way her eyes had held mine as if she'd seen through every carefully constructed layer of me. She came by my desk with her usual grace, the click of her heels soft but precise on the polished floor. There was something about the way she moved that made it impossible not to notice. Even in a simple blouse and pencil skirt, she carried a presence that made the air feel warmer, heavier. "Have you finished the Henderson report?" she asked, voice calm, almost casual, but the brush of her hand against my shoulder as she leaned in for a closer look felt anything but casual. My pulse hitched. I tried to focus, pretending to adjust the papers in front of me, but my fingers trembled slightly. She noticed, of course, though she didn't comment. I thought about her past, the glimpses I'd caught between her smiles and sighs. A woman of her age, graceful and poised, carrying the weight of experiences she didn't speak of aloud. I knew she'd had love before, or maybe something she thought was love, and I imagined the kind of disappointments that made someone like her cautious, even wary. Maybe that's why she measured her closeness with me, why she lingered but never crossed the invisible line we both recognized. And yet, the attraction between us was undeniable. Forbidden, maybe, at least in the quiet, polite ways of the world, but undeniable. I caught myself watching how her lips curved when she spoke, how her eyes flicked to mine in fleeting moments, how she allowed herself to hover near just long enough to make the air electric before stepping back. Every small movement carried weight. I remembered my own past, the easy flings and failed connections that left me feeling hollow. With her, there was something different, something that mattered beyond the physical. She made me want to listen, to notice, to be present. And yet, I had to hide it. I couldn't let myself be obvious, not when the world might see what we were starting to feel. We worked in silence for a while, only the sound of typing and the occasional sigh breaking the quiet. Then she leaned closer again, ostensibly to point at a figure in the report. But this time our hands touched. Just a brief graze, a lightning strike that left me acutely aware of the warmth of her skin. She didn't pull away immediately, and I realized she was waiting, testing, maybe, to see if I would respond. I didn't. I forced myself to focus on the page, but I could feel her presence pressing into me from all sides. "Do you ever feel like you're stuck in the same patterns?" she asked, eyes on the numbers but voice soft, intimate, as if she were confiding in me something dangerous. I swallowed, caught between the desire to reassure her and the urge to tell her I understood. "Sometimes," I said, voice low, careful. My hand brushed hers as I moved a pen across the paper. The spark returned, subtle but undeniable. She glanced up, eyes catching mine, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the world had stopped. There was no office, no reports, no judgment, just the two of us, suspended in the tension of unspoken things. Her lips curved in a half-smile, and I could see the vulnerability hiding behind her confidence. She knew what this could mean. She knew the risk. And yet, she stayed. She pulled back slightly, enough to give us breathing room, but the electricity lingered. I watched the way her fingers lingered on the edge of the desk, the faint tilt of her head, the quickening of her breath. Every small gesture carried meaning, and I tried to commit each one to memory. "Don't overthink it," she murmured, almost to herself, almost a command, almost a promise. Then, as if to punctuate the moment, she touched my hand briefly, light, fleeting, and devastating. And in that touch, I felt an unspoken connection, acknowledgement, understanding, and the dangerous, thrilling possibility of something more. We both knew it. We both wanted it. And neither of us could admit it, not yet. But for a moment, suspended in the quiet office with only our stolen gestures, the world outside ceased to exist. And when she walked away, leaving me with the faint perfume of her presence, I knew this was only the beginning. The office felt smaller than usual, the hum of computers and the distant chatter of colleagues fading into a background I barely noticed. She leaned over my shoulder, pointing at the spreadsheet, and the brush of her arm against mine was electric, so small, so ordinary, and yet it sent my pulse racing. I tried to focus on the numbers, on the lines of text that blurred under my gaze, but every subtle movement she made, the tilt of her head, the soft exhale near my ear, the way her hair fell across her shoulder, demanded attention. "You missed a line here," she whispered, breath warm against my skin. My hand froze mid-motion on the keyboard. I could feel the faint tremor in my fingers, the unnatural tightness of my chest. I wanted to lean back, to step away, but something in her gaze held me. A notification pinged from my phone. I cursed softly under my breath and tried to look down without breaking eye contact with her. She noticed, of course, and her lips quirked in a knowing, almost teasing smile. "You're distracted," she said softly. "I'm not," I stammered. My words sounded hollow, even to me. I wanted to tell her the truth, that every glance, every near touch, had me spinning. But there were rules, even if only ones we'd invented silently between ourselves. We worked in silence again, short bursts of movement, a pencil rolling across the desk, a hand adjusting a paper, a subtle shift closer, then farther away. Each motion was loaded with tension, a conversation in gestures alone. Then she leaned just a fraction closer, and I felt her warmth enveloping me. My chest tightened, my heartbeat thundering so loudly I was sure she could hear it. I could smell her perfume, soft, floral, with that faintly dangerous undertone, and I wanted nothing more than to reach out, to close the distance entirely. But someone could walk in. Someone always could. And that thought hammered in my skull, keeping me tethered to restraint. A knock at the door startled both of us. I barely had time to pull back before the assistant peeked inside. She cleared her throat awkwardly, glanced at the papers, and left without a word. My shoulders relaxed, but the tension didn't dissipate. If anything, it had intensified. She stayed close, her hand brushing mine as she gathered her notes. The touch was fleeting but incendiary. I swallowed hard, and she caught my reaction, eyes narrowing, reading me like a book I hadn't even realized was open. We shouldn't, I started, but the words died. Her gaze softened, the smallest smile playing at her lips. She reached out again, just enough to let her fingers graze mine, and in that instant, I felt the weight of everything we weren't allowed to say. Age, perception, hesitation, all of it pressing against our skin, but irrelevant under the pull between us. A heartbeat later, I realized she had leaned closer than ever. Her shoulder brushed mine, closer than necessary, her presence overwhelming yet intoxicating. I tried to step back, but my body betrayed me. My chest still pressed subtly against hers, the world narrowing down to that one charged space between us. She tilted her head, eyes half-lidded, reading me, daring me. I wanted to close the gap completely, to let restraint fall away, but fear, caution, and the impossibility of what we were tempted to do kept me rooted. And yet, even as we tried to resist, even as our minds screamed to step apart, our bodies betrayed us, pulled closer than ever, hovering on the edge of something forbidden, beautiful, and irreversible. The moment shattered only when a distant laugh from the hallway reminded us of reality. She pulled back just enough to mask what had nearly happened, but the tension lingered, thick and palpable. I watched her straighten, smooth her skirt, and give me that same half-smile, the one that said, "We're not done," far from it. The office was dimmer now, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. I could feel the tension coiled between us like a tightly wound spring, impossible to ignore, impossible to release. She had stopped pretending her presence didn't affect me, and I had stopped pretending I could resist her. She leaned over my desk again, close enough that her hair brushed my cheek, the subtle scent of jasmine and something darker wrapping around me. My fingers twitched, hovering over the papers I wasn't reading. I could feel her warmth pressing into me, her shoulder grazing mine, her breath faint against my ear. "Why do we keep doing this?" she murmured, voice low, almost a whisper, but every word landed like a spark. I swallowed, heart hammering. "Because I don't know how to stop." The confession slipped out before I could catch it, raw and unpolished, and I saw the way her eyes widened just slightly. Her hand reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and her fingers lingered near my cheek. That touch, so light, so deliberate, made it impossible to think. My chest tightened, every nerve alive with need and fear and longing all at once. "You shouldn't feel that way," she said, almost a warning, almost a challenge. Her eyes were dark, luminous, searching me, and I realized she was feeling the same impossible pull. "I can't help it," I whispered back. I can't." She leaned even closer, her body pressing against mine, and I could feel the subtle weight of her presence as if gravity itself had shifted to pull us together. My lips parted, my mind screaming both yes and no, and the world outside, the office, the reports, the rules, faded into insignificance. For a heartbeat, everything hung there. The air was thick, every subtle movement amplified, her hand trembling slightly as it hovered near mine, my shoulder brushing hers, the sound of our breathing filling the empty space. I wanted to close the gap completely, to finally let this forbidden thing between us become real. "I shouldn't," she started, voice trembling now, eyes flicking to mine with an intensity one couldn't withstand. "You shouldn't," I echoed, but it wasn't denial. It was a plea, a promise, and a warning all at once. Her gaze softened, but there was fire in it too, an unspoken dare. She leaned so close that our foreheads almost touched, and I could feel her breath, warm and tantalizing, brush against my lips. Every instinct screamed to bridge the distance, to taste the impossible, but reality, social boundaries, age, consequence, hung like a shadow over the moment. And then, a soft click at the door, almost inaudible, but enough. She froze, our suspended moment shattering like glass. I stepped back slightly, and she did the same, but the electricity lingered, thick and almost unbearable. She looked at me, eyes wide, lips parted, and for a moment, I could see everything we wanted reflected there. Desire. Fear. Regret. And promise. I can't, not now, she whispered. And even as she spoke, the air between us felt charged, the unspoken question still hanging, will we? Or won't we? The hum of the office felt louder than usual, sharper somehow, like it was tuned to the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I wasn't ready for this moment, though part of me had always sensed it was coming. She walked in, her usual poise tempered by something raw, almost frantic, that made her even more magnetic. I need to tell you something, she said, voice low, urgent. She didn't sit, didn't move away, just stood there, eyes fixed on mine, and it was impossible to look anywhere else. I felt my pulse spike. What is it? I asked, trying to sound casual, though my chest ached. She hesitated, fingers brushing against the edge of the desk, lingering near mine without quite touching. The contact, or near contact, sent a jolt through me that made my hands shake. Someone overheard us yesterday. Someone who shouldn't have. And, they might have told your boss. The words hit me like ice. My stomach dropped, and I instinctively stepped back, trying to give space I didn't want. My eyes met hers, searching for reassurance, for guidance, for a hint that everything wasn't about to collapse. I didn't mean for it, I started, but she held up a hand. I know, she interrupted, voice trembling slightly, but still that controlled, mesmerizing composure beneath the fragility. But it doesn't change how I feel. And I think you feel the same. Her admission landed like a secret detonating in the quiet room. My throat went dry, every instinct screaming yes even as my mind flailed with caution, social rules, impossibility. The thought of everyone discovering, of her life and mine being dissected, should have terrified me. And yet, my body betrayed me, leaning closer, drawn like a moth to fire. I admitted, voice barely above a whisper, my hand brushing against hers unintentionally. She froze for a heartbeat, then didn't pull away. The electricity between us surged, intensified by the risk, by the forbiddenness of what we were about to allow. Her eyes softened, searching mine with a mixture of vulnerability and daring. I've wanted you to notice me, really notice me, for a long time. Her hand hovered near mine again, fingers trembling slightly. I swallowed hard, aware of the warmth radiating from her, of the subtle sway in her posture that brought us even closer. My chest pressed lightly against hers, though we both tried to maintain the illusion of distance. The office, the walls, the consequences, all seemed irrelevant compared to the force pulling us together. And then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned closer. The faint scent of her perfume wrapped around me, intoxicating, distracting, dangerous. My fingers twitched, longing to close the gap fully, to touch, to connect, to surrender to the undeniable magnetism. A soft knock on the glass door startled us both. We froze, barely breathing, the moment suspended. She stepped back slightly, just enough to reclaim the necessary space, but our hands brushed in the retreat, lingering in a way that made my fingers hum with sensation. Her gaze held mine, intense, lingering. We can't pretend anymore, she whispered, and there was no teasing this time, only the raw pull of truth, desire, and fear mingled together. I wanted to ask her what came next, what the world might think, what risk we were willing to take. But the words lodged in my throat. Instead, we simply stood there, bodies taut with anticipation, hearts hammering, breath uneven, suspended on the knife's edge between restraint and surrender. And in that charged silence, I realized one thing with brutal clarity: nothing would ever be the same after this. The office had emptied, leaving only the soft hum of the lights above and the lingering tension that clung to the air. We were alone, the world outside momentarily irrelevant. She stood a mere breath away, and I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the subtle sway of her body as if gravity itself had shifted toward me. Her eyes searched mine, intense, vulnerable, daring. Every thought I had, every fear, every cautionary rule I'd tried to follow, was evaporating under the weight of this moment. I could see the same conflict mirrored in her gaze, the push and pull between desire and restraint, between what we wanted and what we knew we shouldn't. "Do you really want this?" she whispered, voice low, almost trembling, yet edged with certainty. I swallowed, acutely aware of the small space separating us. I don't want to step back," I admitted, letting the truth hang between us, heavy and undeniable. My fingers twitched, aching to close the distance, to bridge the gap that had haunted every stolen glance, every lingering touch. She tilted her head slightly, a subtle breath catching in her throat as if my words had unlocked something within her. Then, slowly, she reached out, letting her fingertips brush against my arm, not forceful, not demanding, but deliberate, intimate. My chest tightened, and I stepped closer, until our bodies were almost touching, the air between us thick with want and uncertainty. Her hand lifted, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, fingers lingering near my cheek. My pulse spiked. The world outside, the office, the rules, the impossible age difference, fell away. Nothing existed beyond the magnetism pulling us together. "I don't want to regret this," she murmured, almost to herself, almost a confession. "But I can't pretend I don't feel it anymore." "I don't want to either," I breathed, voice low, raw, trembling with both fear and anticipation. I wanted to tell her everything I hadn't dared admit, the way I'd watched her, the way every small gesture had felt like a message meant only for me. But words weren't enough. Our silence, heavy and charged, spoke more than I ever could. Her hand slid slightly down, fingertips brushing mine, and the contact was enough to make me shiver. She leaned in imperceptibly, the warmth of her body pressing against me ever so lightly. I mirrored her movement, closing the remaining distance with careful, deliberate slowness, savoring every second. And then, our lips hovered inches apart. Every heartbeat, every inhale, every subtle tremor in our bodies screamed yes, but neither of us moved too quickly. We were on the edge, suspended in that raw, messy, human moment where desire, fear, and understanding collided. Finally, she let out a small, shaky laugh, half relief, half wonder, and whispered, "So, this is really happening, isn't it?" I nodded, voice low, certain. "Yes. I understand you now. Completely." Her eyes softened, a smile breaking through the tension, and I realized in that instant that we no longer needed to pretend, no longer needed to hold back. The choice had been made, not through grand declarations, but through proximity, touch, and the quiet surrender of two people who had finally acknowledged the truth between them. We stood there, together, fully seen, fully known, the impossible somehow becoming real. The city lights glimmered through the office windows, casting long reflections on the polished floor. We stayed close, not needing to speak, not needing to justify anything. The air was thick with the residue of our choices, of the tension that had finally been allowed to blossom into something real. She leaned into me, head resting lightly against my shoulder. I felt the gentle rise and fall of her breath, the subtle warmth that radiated from her body, and it grounded me in a way I hadn't known I needed. My hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably, like they'd always been meant to fit together. "You're really here," she murmured, voice soft, almost shy now, a hint of vulnerability peeking through her confidence. "I'm here," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere." She tilted her head up to look at me, eyes sparkling with a mixture of relief and wonder. "Even with everything? The difference in our ages, what people might think." I smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face and letting my thumb linger against her cheek. "Even with everything. None of that matters here. Not now. Not with us." Her smile widened, the kind that reached her eyes and softened the edges of every fear I'd seen in her before. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to mine, and I felt a quiet, grounding peace wash over me. A long moment passed where nothing existed but the two of us, close, warm, safe in our own little world. We laughed softly together, a shared sound that broke the lingering tension and reminded us that this was real, messy, human. She rested her head back against my chest, and I pulled her closer, careful and deliberate, as if memorizing the feel of her, the scent, the way she fit against me. I think I've waited a long time for this, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Me too, I admitted. And I don't want it to end. There was no rush, no need for grand gestures. Just the slow, deliberate closeness of two people who had crossed impossible boundaries and found something genuine on the other side. Her hand pressed into mine again, our fingers curling naturally, as if they had done this forever. We stayed like that, quiet and content, letting the world continue outside the office. No judgment, no fear, only warmth and presence. I felt her lips brush the top of my head in a soft kiss, a silent promise of everything we were beginning to explore together. And in that moment, I realized, all the hesitation, the risk, the tension, it had been worth it. We were together, fully present, fully seen, and ready to face whatever came next as us. As she leaned her head against my chest again, I whispered, almost to myself, this is real. And it's ours. She smiled, soft and certain, and I knew she understood completely.